Hello out there, indoor gardening lovers. My name is Greg Dreiss, and welcome to the Indoor Gardener Podcast, part of the Wainwright Broadcasting System, where we do the Joe Sixpack Racing Podcast, the Curmudgeon Radio Show, do another one coming up very soon called the Dive Bar Podcast, but this one is the Indoor Gardener Podcast, where we'll talk about all things indoor gardening, from houseplants to seed starting, to lighting, to fertilizer, to nutrients, propagation, soils. And today's topic, we're going to jump right into one of the hot buttons in the gardening world, and that is prop lifting. Prop lifting is a combination, or a portmanteau, as they would say on Wiki, of the words propagation and shoplifting. Prop lifting is the practice of either taking a cutting off a plant in a store or picking a cutting up off the ground, taking it home and growing it on. And some people call it horticultural therapy. I call it stealing because that's simply what it is. And there's a problem with it because so many times it's just so easy to say in a store that, I found it on the floor. Well, if you found it on the floor, it's not yours. It's still mine or still belongs to the store that you picked it up off the floor from. And it's stealing because if you go over to the clothing department at Target or Walmart and you find a bag of socks and a pair of socks fell out of the bag, the athletic socks that the jocks wear or ankle socks that the jocks wear, and that pair of socks is laying there on the floor, you don't pick it up and take it home. So why are you going to do that with a plant? Because the theory is, or the thought is, well, it's going to end up in the garbage anyway. It doesn't matter. You can't come into my yard and go into my garbage can and take stuff out. Now, again, if it's out by the side of the road, that's considered something different, but you can't go through my garbage. You can't go through my dumpster at my store. So why should you be able to pick garbage up off the floor? As well, if you go over to the food department in Walmart or Target, and there's a box of Twinkies with 6 or 12 individually wrapped Twinkies in the package, one of them falls on the floor, you're not allowed to pick it up and take it home. So you can't do that with plants. And I got into a big hullabaloo on that gigantic houseplant group on Facebook, Houseplant Hobbyist. And somebody said, well, it's all going to go in the garbage anyway, and don't tell us what we should do. Well, some of the other ones, and the most striking comment was, there's a lot of other things to worry about in this world than throwing somebody out or arresting them for picking up something off the floor that's going in the garbage anyway. First of all, you're assuming it's going in the garbage anyway. Second of all, because it's a big box store you're picking it up from, as opposed to an individual garden center or small plant shop, that's not the difference. It's not yours. You have no right to it. So the reason we have all these other things to worry about, or bigger fish to fry, as the saying goes, is because we stopped worrying about the little things. Okay? The little things like using your turn signal, the little things like obeying the speed limit, the little things like stealing a box of pens from work, or it's acceptable to take a little bit here, or take an extra 6 or 7 packages of sugars or creamers and stick them in your purse or backpack as you're leaving a store or a restaurant. It's just not right. And the people out there who do this, the shoplifters, will try to get away with anything. And they'll say, I don't have my receipt. I just paid for it. Or the person over there gave it to me and there's no person. They can't describe what the person looks like. It's too easy to say, well, I found it on the floor. But you could have, and many people do, just take the clipping off of an expensive plant. And if they get caught, they say they found it on the floor. It doesn't matter. Okay? If you're driving down the road and the cop pulls you over for doing 47 and a 30 or 65 and a 55, you tell him, well, I wasn't looking at my odometer. My odometer's broken. Doesn't matter. You can't plead ignorance of the law and get away with it. And there's a lot of these plants that are out there today that are patented that it is illegal to asexually propagate them. Asexual propagation means taking a cutting or a division and making new plants out of it. You got to wait for it to go to seed. That's just the law, folks, and that's what it is. And this is a lot different than, going back to the old days in the 80s when I first got in the garden business, and you'd go through the greenhouse and you'd find the little old lady picking a petunia out of a six pack and then an ageratum out of a six pack and putting it in her purse and walking away. Folks, it's still stealing. Now, if you legitimately find it on the floor and you come and grab me in my store and say, "Hey, can I have that cutting that's on the floor there?" I'm probably going to say yes. Because unless it's something really expensive, I'm going to, that I would take back and propagate, or if it's patented, I'd say sure. But folks, it's like you ask first. You're walking down the street and you go by your neighbor's garden with all these front yard gardens, just an apple in the tree hanging over the sidewalk. That doesn't mean you get to pick the apple just because it's hanging over the sidewalk or it's 5 feet into their lawn and you can reach it from the sidewalk. It's not yours. Now, I'm sure I've ticked off a lot of the houseplant people out there, but folks, we are supposed to be planty people out there preaching be nice, be kind, spread love, spread peace, spread plants. Spreading plants by stealing them is not what planty people do. But I'm going to tell you what did happen back in the 1980s when I was managing one of the largest garden centers or garden center companies, independent garden center companies in the whole entire North America. This little boy, he was about 5 or 6 years old, and his mom were shopping. And I want to say it was between Thanksgiving and Christmas, and it was pretty cold out. And he came up to me and said, "Excuse me." And I looked at the mother and I said, "Sure. What can I help you with? Or what can I get for you?" And she said, "Jimmy has a question for you." So I stooped down to get on Jimmy's level, be eye to eye with the, man talk. And he said, "I found this on the floor and I'd like to know if I can have it." And I said, "Well, of course you can. Thank you for asking." By saying thank you for asking, I reiterated that's the right thing to do without saying the right thing to do and pontificating to him. And I said, "I'll tell you what, it's kind of cold outside. So come on down with me. We'll go to the potting area." And we wrapped it up in a wet paper towel and put it in a bag so that it would make it safe home. Now, this kid was 6 years old, and you know what 6-year-olds do. If you weren't after your 6-year-old to feed his puppy, he'd probably forget to feed the puppy or feed him too much. So 6-year-olds around Christmas time, their eyes are all a wonder with all the colors of the season and all the bright lights and fancy stuff and school vacations and Thanksgiving and Christmas trees. He might lose that plant or leave it in the car. And as you know, if it's an African violet cutting, it's all fleshy and full of moisture. It's going to freeze and die on a 30-degree night outside. So I also took him over to the African violet table and I said, "You know what?" I said, "Your little plant there is going to need a big brother." Yes, I said big brother because back in the 80s, we knew the correct pronouns to use without even having to ask. So I gave him, or I let him pick out another African violet in case something happened to the other one. The mother was thrilled, and I did not do it to make sure that that mother, every time she came in, told her kid about the nice gesture I did. I did it just because I know how 6-year-olds are, because at that time I had a 6-year-old who would buy something at the store that he wanted to eat and leave it in the car and it would get stale and he'd get all upset about it. So I made that kid's day, and that's how you do it. If you find a cutting on the floor and it's a Monstera Albo Monstrosity Lubicrocious or whatever the newest $140 4-inch pot is, you stake it out, you put your signs around it, crime scene or don't cross under penalty of death. You go grab somebody and say, "Hey, this fell on the floor. Do you mind if I take it?" Chances are, unless it's a patented plant or something very expensive, I'm going to say yes. So please, folks, we're plant people. We like to pat ourselves on the shoulder and walk around all, strutting our stuff and saying we care about other people, we care about the environment, we care about plants. Well, if you do, you're going to care about other people's property and not pick something up off the floor without asking first. Now, if the store has a sign, go ahead. If they encourage it, that's fine. But after 30 something years in retail, I know how people push the limits. And so many times I know what's going on in plant shops and Depot and Lowe's. You see that patented plant, you may not know it's patented, but it's all over Instagram. Hurricane fern before that was everywhere, neon pothos before that was everywhere, the black ZZ plants before they were everywhere. You find a cutting on the floor and you're like, "Ooh, look what I got." Well, what you got should be a guilty conscience. And that's that. Prop lifting is shoplifting. If you want to leave some comments, you can leave them on anchor.fm. You can find me on the Indoor Gardener on Facebook, the Indoor Gardener on TikTok, the Indoor Gardener on Instagram. And also, you can please check out my little shop online. We're out of an extra room in the house after kid moved out. I have plants that I'm propagating and growing and selling online at the Indoor Gardening, the indoorgarden.etsy.com. And stay tuned for other podcasts coming up. And the subject is indoor gardening, brought to you by Wainwright Broadcasting. Thanks for listening.